right, guys. Good morning. Can you hear me? Sound check, number 2. Can you hear me? Great. Visual is good. Awesome. How was your week vacation? Good? All right. Fallon says it was good. Olga just shakes her head, saying good. All right. All right. Still have people joining. All right. Do you guys have any questions before we start? Any questions? Drop them down in the chat. I know you guys been studying hard about that first week. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I played the class calendar. Oh, because I created the calendar for the next class, but not for this one. Okay. All right, I'll put it there. Whatever's left. Yeah. Anything else regarding the actual chapters 1 through 10? Or you guys got it all covered? All right. If anybody's watching on YouTube, let me know that you're there so I can address your questions as we go. Today, by the way, guys, we're only going to have one chapter. This is a big chapter, so I'm going to break it into 2 parts. And it's very, very important chapter. This is the, I would say probably the most heavily tested chapter, because then it falls into other chapters like listings, contracts, just pretty much chapters regarding the profession itself and what we should be doing as agents. All right. So as it says, national agency. And when we're talking about agency, guys, right here, we're not talking about real estate agency. When we're talking about agency, right here, this means employer, employee relationship. See, we are employer-employee relationship. See, we are agents, right? We're not just salespeople. We're not just broker salespeople. We are agents. And what does that mean? That means we're helping somebody accomplish their goal, whatever that goal might be, right? So when you're a real estate agent, that means somebody hired you, therefore employer hired you to perform a particular service. So you became the employee of that person, right? So when we talk about the word agency, you have to make it clear what your role in that relationship is. So if you have a seller that hired your agency, let's say your real estate agency, to perform a service through you, right? Because you're the listing agent, let's say, then you owe certain duties to the seller. You have to uphold the seller's interests. Does that make sense? Right? Much as if you were working for somebody. Let's say you're working at a restaurant, you're working at a retail store, whatever it might be. Are you going to do whatever the customer says, or are you going to do whatever your boss says? You see what I'm saying? So if somebody hires you to sell their home, they are your employer, and therefore it's their interest first, then yours, then everybody else. So we're going to smile to the customers. We're going to treat them fairly and honestly. But our primary interest, our primary goal is that your employer is satisfied. You guys got it? So when we're talking about the word agency and what we're going to go over today, it has to be very, very clear on who you represent and what duties are owed to that particular party. When we're talking about agency, it means you are hired by somebody. Okay? If you are not hired, then an agency was not created. Therefore, no employer, no employee relationship. They are simply customers and you do not owe them any duty, okay, or any responsibilities or any liability for that matter, okay? So I know it's a little confusing to start with, but you guys are going to see it right now. Ready? So we're going to start with agency relationship, basic roles, types of agency, creating an agency, and terminating an agency. So the most primary of relationships in real estate brokerage is that between the broker and the client, okay? The relationship is known in law as the agency relationship, and in every state, a body of law generally called the law of agency defines and regulates the legal roles of this relationship. The parties to the relationship are the principal, which is a client, agent, which is the broker, and the customer, which is a third party. So let's define this before we go any further. The word principal, you need to be very clear about this. The word principal means the client. Principal means the client. If there's a client, that means you were hired. Okay? You're hired to represent. You're hired to be an agent. So the word principal means you were hired by someone. The principal could be the buyer. The principal could be the seller. The key thing here is who hired you. Okay? So principal is the client that hired you. Okay? Write this down somewhere. Principal is the client who hired you. All right? Next. Agents. Now the agent is the broker, right? Because all we do and everything we do, you guys are going to learn as we go, but everything we do is on behalf of the broker. So did the client hire us, even though we're the ones that knocked on the door? Or did the client hire the broker? Who did the client hire? Who did the seller hire? Well, they hired your brokerage and their services, okay? And you, as the agent of the broker, you become what's called a sub-agent, okay? So always, the broker is the one hired. So the agent is the broker. The salesperson is a sub-agent. Salesperson is a sub-agent because we represent the broker, right? If you work for RE/MAX, you're a RE/MAX agent, and your broker, in this case RE/MAX, or the broker of record is RE/MAX for this purpose, right? The broker is the one that was hired through your services. You got it? So in this scenario, before I move any further, in this scenario, direct scenario, you're the listing agent, right? In this scenario, we have seller. Hold on. We have broker. And we have salesperson. So that means that this is the principal. This is the agent of the principal. And you are a sub-agent of the principal. Okay? So this is the way it works. We have a seller that hires you. The seller is the principal. the one to whom we owe specific duties. We have a broker, which is the one you work for. The broker is the one that becomes the agent. Okay? And because you work for a broker or you represent a broker, you become a sub-agent or representative of the principal. Okay? Everything you do is on behalf of the broker. So all your actions are through your broker. This also means that the seller pays the broker, not the salesperson. So you guys, what I'm trying to show you here, and we'll go over this in a different chapter more in detail, what I'm trying to show here is that it doesn't matter you doing the work or not, you knocking on the door or not, everything goes through your broker, even payments. Now, I'm not telling you that whoever hired you, in this case the seller, is the one that pays you. But what I'm telling you is if there's a payment that comes from the person that hired you, right? That payment always goes through the broker. So let's change this a little bit. Let's say it was the buyer that hired you. What changed? Absolutely nothing. The buyer hires you, therefore hired your broker, because you represent your broker and all your actions are through your broker. So even though you're the one that talked to the buyer, the broker is the agent, and you, the person that was directly to the buyer, you're still a sub-agent because all your actions, all your dealings is representing your broker. And your broker and you represent the client or the principal. Okay? Let me just add this here. Client or principal. So it doesn't matter here, it doesn't matter if it's the buyer, if it's the seller. What matters is they hired you, therefore they're your client. And you become agent or sub-agent in this case, right, of the buyer or sub-agent of the seller. Throw me questions you might have before I proceed. No questions? All right, so if there's no question, I'm going to move forward. And we cover this. Agent, broker, who are you, right, in this role? So we had client, which is the principal, hired you. And then agent is the broker, not you. You, the salesperson, you're a sub-agent. All right? Don't forget, we don't call ourselves sub-agent and we don't walk around saying, hey, I'm a sub-agent. No, we don't do that. Right? What I was trying to show you is the notion of if you represent your broker and your broker is the agent, then you're a sub-agent. Okay, but we're still the agent and we're still owe duties to the client. Okay, so very, very important. And that brings us to, ready? The customer. Okay, customer, I know it's below, but I want to put it right here. Customer is a third party. This one's confusing. All right. So a customer is a third party that did not hire you. Customer is a third party that did not hire you. So remember, client is the one that hired you. Okay? Customer did not hire you. So let's go back to this example. Let's say here, in this scenario, we represent the buyer. Let's say here we have a seller. Okay? So we represent the buyer. What is our job? Our job is to show several homes and find one that the buyer likes. Okay? So there's seller A. There's seller B. There's seller C. We're showing 3 homes. Who hired us? Was it the seller? No. In this scenario, the buyer hired us, right? So there's this wall right here. We're going to put a wall. Right? There's this wall, which is a separation of who your client is, because we're showing several properties to the buyer. Then these people right here, they are considered customers. If you remember what we wrote back here, a customer is the one who you do not represent, the one that did not hire you. So we do not represent. Who do we represent? Our principal. I know it's tiny letters. I will zoom back in. But who do we represent? We represent our principal. We represent the buyer because the buyer is the one that hired us. So therefore, every time we show a property, there's this clear separation of duties. Here, we owe duties, responsibilities, and we have liability. Okay? On this side, well, more. Okay. On this side right here, we have to treat fairly and honestly. All right? So on this side, whoever you represent, the one you represent, we owe specific duties, which I'll talk about in a second. We have certain responsibilities. And we have liability. So our actions makes us liable to our clients, right? In this side, the seller is just a customer. We don't represent. Like we could show 100 houses, right? We don't represent the sellers in this particular instance. So all we have to do is walk in. We have to smile, nod, and say, yeah, sure, no problem. But who does our heart have to belong to? Who does our mind have to belong to? Who do these two have to belong to? To the client, the principal. Okay, these are the ones we really have to uphold their interests first, right? So there's a clear separation of who the client is, or the principal, and customer. Okay, sellers in this scenario, customers. Now I'm going to flip the role here. And we're going to do what we had before. We had seller. Here, you're going to put buyer. All right. As you guys can see, not much changed, right? Let me just take this money out of here because it doesn't matter. As you guys can see, not much changed. We just replaced the seller with the buyer. Everything else is the same, right? So what am I saying here? It's very simple. Whoever hired you is your client or the principal to whom you owe specific duties, who you have certain responsibilities to, and can hold you liable for your actions. Now, if we have a seller, there's a lot of buyers that are going to come see the property. There's buyer A, buyer B, buyer C. Who are these people? They are customers because you don't represent them. Therefore, all you have to do is treat them fairly and honestly. Again, if you work at a restaurant, right, you're waiting on the tables. 50 people sit down and 50 people say, hey, I don't want to pay, right? The food was great, service was amazing, but I don't want to pay. Whose interest do you need to uphold? Is it the person that sat down to eat or your employer, the restaurant? Okay, so that's what you have to think. Who hired you? So everybody else that comes to see the property or that you show properties to, or that whatever might be the scenario, everybody else is always the customer who you do not represent. Just have to smile, nod, and sure, move back and see who your client is. All right, you have to make this very clear. There's so many questions in the state exam regarding the party that you represent. Okay, there's a lot of questions where, hey, you're the listing agent, right? And the buyer brings an offer and the buyer says, hey, I have more money. If they don't accept that, I have more money. Now think about it. If you're the listing agent, you represent the seller. If the buyer says, hey, I have more money, in your mind goes, well, I'm gonna tell my seller right away that they have more money, right? Because their offer is a low ball if I know they have more money and they're already willing to go up. So I'm going to go to my to my clients, to the seller and say, hey, seller, here's an offer, but the buyer told me they have more money. You see what I'm saying? Your duty is to the seller in this scenario, right? But you still have to treat your customer fairly and honestly. So you don't represent the buyer. But once the buyer told you, even though you're the listing agent, you represent the seller. Once the buyer told you, hey, here's an offer, but I have more money, right? Once the buyer did that, you have to let him know, hey, listen, be fair, be honest. I represent the seller. The way you told me right now and anything you tell me from here on, I will tell my client. You guys understand? You cannot take advantage of the situation just because you don't represent them. You can't not take advantage of the situation. You have to give them a heads up. I do not represent you. So anything you tell me right now, right? Think about the Miranda rights. And you say anything you say can and will be used against you in the real estate transaction. So the moment they give you too much info, you have to stop them right there and let them know you don't represent them. So either you hire me to represent you if you are unrepresented, or your agent needs to be present in these negotiations or consult an attorney for these negotiations. You guys good with this? All right, cool. Want to make sure we're on point. So there's this clear separation here as we just went over. And we're going to repeat all this stuff, by the way. Great. All right, a few people are having Wi-Fi issues. We're in 2020 and technology is still going through a lot of problems. You see that? All right, laws of agency. Now, laws of agency are distinct from laws of contract. We went over laws of contract, right? They're distinct. Although the two groups of laws interact with each other, that's why I told you guys there are several questions that will involve contracts, listings, leases, and they fall into national agency, right? A listing agreement, a contract, establishes the agency relationship. Thus, the relationship is subject to contract law. However, the agency law dictates how the relationship will achieve its purposes, regardless of what the listing contract states. Okay, so two different laws. We have contract law, we have law of agency. The contract law stipulates how the contract is to be prepared, right? So what the contract entails, what it expresses or implies, right? Law of agency simply expresses what your duties are towards that client in that particular contract. You guys understand? So one is about how a contract needs to be stipulated, which is having competent parties, right? Offer and acceptance, consideration, so there's an exchange of value, and B, for a legal purpose. These four are essential. In the agency relationship says, hey, we're getting into a contract. This is how I represent you in that contract. You guys understand? So it's two separate things. We need to be clear about this. The essence of the agency relationship is trust, confidence, and mutual good faith. So the essence of agency. You as a seller should be able to trust me as an agent, right? You as a seller should have confided in me, right? And know that I will not betray you. I will do everything in my power to help you achieve your goal. And therefore, mutual good faith. I also expect you to do certain things. Like as a seller, I expect you to do certain things in order for my job to go smoothly. So we both have to participate. But there has to be trust and confidence. The principal trusts the agent to exercise the utmost skill and care in fulfilling the authorized activity and to promote the principal's best interests. The agent undertakes to strive in good faith to achieve the desired objective and to fulfill fiduciary duties. So we already covered all this stuff. I don't have this highlighted, but it's something you need to understand as well. It says right here, it is important to understand that the agency relationship does not require compensation or any form of consideration. Okay? So we're going to stop right here. What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter who you represent. That doesn't mean they're the ones paying you. That's what it says. So, nor does compensation define the agency relationship. A party other than the principal may compensate the agent. So, what we just said now is, whoever pays you, you don't owe them any duties unless they're the ones that hired you. To be clear, most transactions, and pay attention to this, most is not all, most transactions, the seller already agreed to pay the commission. But if you represent the buyer, right, then who pays you? Is it the buyer or is it the seller? Let me know in the chat. Who pays you? Go ahead. If you represent the buyer, and I told you that in most transactions, the seller is the one that agreed to pay the commission, right? Then who pays you? You are all wrong. All of you. Who pays you? Oh, right there. Boom. Romello for the win. The broker pays you guys. Didn't I say that before? Everything you do is through your broker. Right? And you can only get paid by your broker. So let me be clear about this. In the state exam, there's a lot of tricky questions. You represent the seller. Right? There's a payment. Who pays you? The broker. Always. The buyer or the seller want to give you a bonus. Oh, Kimmy gave me the answer on the YouTube Live. There you go, broker. So, hey Kimmy, how are you? So, going back to the scenario is, you represent the seller, you represent the buyer. It does not matter. Everything you do is through your broker. So your broker is the one that pays you, always. Now, what if the seller or the buyer want to give you a bonus? What if they wanted to give you extra cash? Hey, your service was amazing. Love it. You did everything possible. You went above and beyond to help me buy or to help me sell. Here's an extra $5,000 bonus. Who pays you the bonus? Or who do they pay the bonus to? Okay. All right, now we got it. There you go. The broker. Broker only. The only one allowed to receive any type of compensation in a real estate transaction is the broker. Now, the broker will split with you because they made an agreement that you, as an independent contractor, right, will get a cut of every deal you bring and that closes, right? So if it's a bonus or a regular transaction, commission, whatever, everything goes through your broker and you get a piece of it or all of it, depending on the arrangement you have with your broker. All right? The question I just asked you guys about bonus or about who pays you and stuff like that, it's a guaranteed state exam question. Guaranteed. So if you guys are not paying attention to these questions, it will be a problem. There's so many questions about who is your first duty to, right? Who's going to pay you? Oh, there's more money. Where should that money go? Unless you're the broker, no money flows in this transaction. All right? So you have to be very, very clear about this. I don't know how to stress this enough. We're going to go this whole 3 hours, right? The next 3 hours, we're going to go always back to this point. Broker is the one that gets paid. You are an agent of the broker, therefore sub-agent of the client, right? So be very clear about that. All right. In an agency relationship, a principal hires an agent as a fiduciary to perform desired service on the principal's behalf. As a fiduciary, the agent has legal obligation to fulfill the specific fiduciary duties throughout the term of the relationship. Now, we already covered this. The principal or client is the party who hires the agent, right? The principal or client is the party who hires the agent. The agent is the fiduciary of the principal. That means you owe specific duties to the principal. And the customer or prospect is a third party in this transaction whom the agent does not represent. Okay? The agent works with a customer in fulfilling the client's objectives, right? A seller, buyer, landlord, or tenant may be a customer. A third party who is potential customer is also a prospect. Now, according to the level of authority delegated to the agent, there's 3 types of agency. We have universal, general, and special agency. We're going to start with universal agency. Now, universal agency, I want you guys to write full powers. Okay? You're going to write full powers. All right? Because here's what I want you to understand. Universal agency. First of all, we're talking about law of agency. We're not talking about real estate specifically. So universal agency, when it comes to a real estate brokerage, does not exist. But in the laws of agency, of being an employer or employee, it might exist. All right? So let's look at this real quick. Full powers. Universal agent is somebody that can work on behalf of somebody else, take actions on behalf of somebody else, and legally bind somebody else to those actions. Meaning, I represent you to the fullest extent. Let's think about who could be a universal agent. If you have, raise your hand if you have kids. If you're a parent, raise your hand if you're a parent. All right, cool. I'm not putting the same category, but those of you that did not raise your hand if you have a pet. Pets? Okay, cool. So whether you have kids or you have pets, it does not matter. Derek, Rocio, don't laugh. I'm not comparing them, okay? I'm not putting them in the same category. That's not what I tried to say here, okay? She just threw her kid away. It's not even in the, he's not even in the camera anymore. Kid away, here comes the pet. Yep. All right, so the point was, they are wards. What wards mean is somebody that you need to take care of because they're not self-sufficient, right? So when you have children, we take action on their behalf. We have full powers over what we believe to be best for them. Does that make sense? So if we go cross-country, that's usually my example. If we go cross-country, are we going to ask our kids, like, to say they're 3 years old, as an example, or 5 years old, or 10 years old? Hey, what do you think? We're going to California. What do you think? You know what? we're going to go to Japan. What do you think? We don't do that. We grab the kids and we go. We believe it's the best thing for them, and they still don't understand. They're still not 100% aware of their options. Does that make sense? So we take action in their behalf, right? And it's legally binding. You moved, they move. Period. There's no going back. They're not going to say, oh, no, you can go to Japan, I'll stay back. Right? Try to tell your cat that and see what the cat says. Right? It's not going to happen. Well, a cat might do that. A dog, no. Dog will go and attach to you. A cat might be like, sure, go. Doesn't matter. Anyway, but that's full powers right here. It could also be if you have a living trust, right? Or living will. So medical directives, as an example. If I ever fall sick to the point where I cannot take actions, let's say mentally or physically handicapped, I cannot take actions, then I appointed you as the party that will represent me in all matters. If I'm in a coma, as an example, if I'm in a coma, you're going to come to me and say, hey, Bruno, blink twice, or raise your finger, or give me an okay sign, or something. Give me a sign that says I can sell your house in order to keep you alive. You see what I'm trying to say? So we have universal powers. You don't need to ask me. I'm in a coma. You can take action, right? So when I appointed you in my medical directive, when I appointed you, or when I gave a will or anything like that, right, or a living trust, when I did that appointment, I made you my agent or my employee for that particular purpose. You guys understand? So agency still means you represent somebody. I represent my kids. I'm the agent. I'm the one responsible. I'm the fiduciary. You guys understand what we're trying to get at here with the word agency and general agent, universal agent, I'm sorry? Universal, full powers. Does this come in play in real estate? Not as a salesperson, no. Not as a property manager, no. This is literally, I hand it over to you, the keys to everything I have, but make sure it's in my best interest before you take action. All right? As far as general agency, we have some powers. Meaning, I cannot just do anything and everything on your behalf. I can't. I'm limited. Okay? I have more than one power. I can represent you in more than one capacity, but I'm limited to what I can do. So a general agent could be, for instance, now in real estate, could be a property manager. A property manager manages the property, right? They're responsible for hiring employees. They're responsible for contracting for services, so plumbers, electricians, and so on. They're responsible for budget, right? So making sure the expenses, the income and expenses are balanced, and also making sure that the property increases in value over time. So there's more than one responsibility or duty that I have, right, on behalf of my client, which is the owner of the building. But can I sell the building without the client's authorization? As a property manager, can I go and say, hey, today we're selling? And then later on say, hey, Mr. Previous homeowner, right, employer, here's money, I sold it for you. Right, can we do that? No. The owner must be aware of certain actions, okay? All right, so next thing we got is special agents. And we're going to write here 1 hour. So the special or limited agent, is usually the salesperson, usually the broker, because we represent the seller in order to sell, and we represent the buyer in order to buy. So once we help him sell and once we help him buy, does our relationship continue? Do we have anything else to do with this particular client? Anybody? Let me know your thoughts. if you're selling and you hired me, hey, Bruno, I would like to sell my house. Now we just closed on the property. Does our business relationship continue? Do I have anything else that I can do? No, right here. Nothing else to do with the client. Correct. So the answer is no, 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 no. Yeah, Nina, perfect. For networking purposes, yeah, if you like my service, could you please recommend it to somebody else? Absolutely. Now, let me ask you the question differently. What if the seller is trying to sell 10 homes and we closed on one? Does our business relationship continue? Now that's a tricky one. Go ahead. Does the business relationship continue? No, because we have a contract for one house. Okay. If it's in the contract, only if you're representing them to sell the remaining homes. If you did a good job, they might ask you to sell other homes, but no. Okay. All right. Here's the magic. If I was hired to sell 10 houses and I just sold one, then yes, it continues. Okay. So I told you it was a tricky one, right? Here's the thing. I have 4 houses here. Every single house, it's the same owner, okay? So we're going to call him John Seller. And John Seller owns all these homes. Now here, for property A, is a contract. I'm going to call it listing agreements. All right. So listing agreement, listing agreement, listing agreement. So there's 4. The thing is, even though it's one seller, every single house has its own individual listing agreement. Can we say, which happens a lot, can we say this is a package deal? If you buy one, you're buying all 4? Yes, we can say that. But each listing has its own independent agreement. So if we close on one, listing agreement ends, contract ends, separated. Okay, so this is no longer here. It ends. Relationship on that property ended. Okay, I still represent on these 3 properties, but our business relationship for that particular one ended. I sell another one. It ends. We have no further dealings when it comes to these properties. They're done. Our relationship ended. Okay? So what I'm trying to say here is, and I appreciate your answers because that was great. I love when people just throw stuff. At least shows me your understanding, which is great. And then I can explain a little bit better. So Felix said, if I was hired to sell 10 and I just sold one, then yes, it continues. It continues for each individual property. Okay, for each individual property. All listing agreements are individual. Very, very important that you guys understand that. Because do I have to talk about this property after it closes? Do I have any responsibility to my client after it closes? Well, there's liability, which could extend to 6 years in certain states, like state of New Jersey, right? Other states might be more, might be less. There's liability that extends if in the future something happens where the seller gets sued and it's proven that it was your actions, then yes, that business relationship will come back to haunt you. But at this point, it ended. You no longer represent your client for these matters, only for each agreement that's still pending. The point still is, every property has its own independent agreement, therefore its own independent agency. So you contracted here a special agency again. Special agent. special agent, and special agent individually, even though it's the same seller. Romello says, if someone hires me to sell 20 houses, does there have to be 20 agreements, or is there any way to bundle them? 20 agreements. What I can say here, when I go to the MLS, when I advertise to the other agents, I can say this is a bundle. So on the MLS, how would we see this? Okay, on the MLS, this would be MLS ID 321546, and then MLS 321560, MLS, so on and so on. So each individual one will be listed with its own MLS. And there's a section for comments, which will be just for agents, right? And it says agent remarks as an example. And this is a notice to the other agents. It could be even in the general remarks, which will say, let's say we're talking about this one, right? Agent remarks on this one says, to be sold with MLS 321560, 321564, and then 321570 as an example. So it's individual agreements. But then we can say, hey, you're buying this one with a condition that you buy these as well. Okay? But each one of them is in individual agreements. Because look, if the offer is that good, let's say there's an offer, but they only want this one and they're saying, hey, I don't want the whole deal. I'll pay a little bit more to keep this one only. If the offer is that good and the seller is willing to separate them, right? Then that's it. It's not going to be sold with these ones. Do you understand? But each individual one is its own independent agreement. Okay, Felix, that is a great question. Never had that one. Why is it a special? Sorry, oh, I did something here. Hold on, I just did something here. Oh, there you go. Okay. Why is it called a special agency if it's limited? Well, because there's full warranties and there's limited warranties, if you ever heard of this, right? A full warranty says, hey, we guarantee everything. So that's like the universal agents, full warranty. A special warranty is limited. That means we agree to cover certain things, but not all of them, right? So every time you see the word special for agency is the same concept. You are limited to what you can and cannot do according to the agreement, what their limitations are. Okay? So, for instance, a listing agreement, let's say it's for 6 months. You are limited to that 6-month agreement. A listing agreement is limited to the sale, right? So it's a special arrangement that we made for this particular sale. That's it. Okay, so special or limited, right? Another thing that's very important is this. Special agents may not bind the contract, the client to, or the principal to a contract. What does that mean? We cannot sign anything on behalf of our clients and make them liable for it. That might be a question in the state exam as well. So if somebody puts an offer, can you sign and accept? No. Okay? Actually, I just answered that question yesterday. Hold on. There was a question. Right here. So there's a question in the school exam, similar to a state exam question. that says that the purchase and sale agreement provides use of earnest money to the seller after the buyer's property inspection, right? Sorry. So the seller requests the earnest money prior to the inspection, right? So this is a very tricky one because the conditions are after the inspection. So what I wrote here, which is very important as my answer to this particular student, what I wrote here, it's in the contract. It says in the contract that the seller that the buyer must release the good faith deposit to the seller after inspection, right? So it's in the contract, but the seller's asking for it prior to the inspection. One of the options, which is the option where this student picked in the question, one of the options was that we must refuse it. Okay? We are agents. Being agents, we're consultants. We make no decisions on behalf of our clients. We cannot bind them to anything on behalf of our client. So as I wrote here, whether it's prior or after, the ultimate decision belongs to the seller and buyer. We consult. We don't make decisions. Okay? So if there's an offer made, must be presented. Right? If there's something in the contract that says, oh, it's only after this or after that, we consultants, we don't make a decision. We have to contact our client and say, hey, the buyer's looking for this. What do you want to do? Seller says no, it's no. Right? We talk to the buyer, hey, the seller is asking for this or asking for that. If the buyer says no, it's no. But we cannot say, hey, my client will not take it. Cannot do that. It's not us. You understand? We consult, we advise. Can we go to the client and say, hey, buyer, I don't think you should. Ultimately, it's your decision. I don't think you should do this or you should do that. We can. We consult. But we cannot bind them to any contract or any change of a contract. You guys got it? We are real estate consultants. What do consultants do? Consult. Advise. Okay? We don't do anything for them. We advise them what they should do. Okay? Put that in your mind is very, very important. So you are limited to what you can and cannot do. If it was here, general agent or universal agent, that's a different story. We have a little bit more advantage than the special agency. You guys got it? Give me a thumbs up if you got it. See? All right, cool. Okay. Next. In most instances, real estate brokerage is based on special agency, and the principal hires a licensed broker to procure a ready, willing, and able buyer or seller. When the objective is achieved, the relationship terminates, although certain fiduciary duties survive the relationship. Like I said, once we close, that's it. It's done. We're over. We're done, right? But certain fiduciary duties survive the relationship. What does that mean? We might still get sued later on for something we did not do. So even though we're done, we're separated, right? It's like a bad divorce, like we didn't do it right. It just lingers, right? And then a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, it might come back to haunt us. That's why we should do the best we can, the best job possible, okay? A lot of people do things and they think, oh, we closed, it's done. No. Statute of limitations. Every state has different statute of limitations for lawsuits. All right, Nina has a question coming. Great question. Would an attorney fall under universal or general agency? Depends. But that's a great question. We're going to get to that in a second. Okay? All right. So, an agency relationship may arise from an express, oral, or written agreement between principal and the agent, or from the actions of the parties by implication. Now, written or oral listing agreements. The most common way of creating an agency relationship is by listing agreement, which may be oral or written. Now, the agreement sets forth the various authorizations and duties, as well as requirements for compensation. A listing agreement establishes an agency for a specified transaction and has a stated expiration. We covered that, right? When I said specified transaction. Each one of these is a transaction, so separate listing agreements. Implied agency. What is something that's implied? Well, expressed, that means I'm telling you, this is what I'm going to do for you. Implied is my actions show that this is what I'm doing or should do for you. You guys understand? So, an agency relationship can arise by implication, intentionally or unintentionally. Implication means that the parties act as if there were an agreement. For example, if an agent promises a buyer to do everything possible to find a property at the lowest possible price, and the buyer accepts the proposition, there may be an implied agency relationship, even though there's no specific agreement. So, even if the agent does not wish to establish agency relationship, the agent's actions may be construed to imply a relationship. So, the moment you take certain steps and you demonstrate to the seller or the buyer, to your client, whoever you're showing the properties to, right, or whoever you're trying to help through the transaction, the moment you take certain actions, you're pretty much saying, hey, you're mine. You're my client, right? So I'm going to do everything possible. We don't have it in writing. We never specifically expressed that you're my client or I'm your agent. We never did that, right? Until now, I was just saying, yeah, sure, I'll help you. I'll help you find something, right? Until now, that's what it was. But the moment we start implying certain things, you could create what's called an implied agency and now owe certain duties. It changes from, yeah, sure, I'll help you find some houses, to, hey, if I don't do a good job, you can still sue me. You guys see the difference? If I'm just helping you find properties or helping you sell your property with no, like, sure, if I do it, I do it. If I don't, I don't type of mentality, right? Then the liability is limited. The moment you say, I'll do everything in my power, even though it's not expressed that you're my client, the moment I start taking those actions, that means I intend to take you on as a client versus a customer. All right? Let me know if you have questions on that. Implied agency means your actions could create that agreement of employer-employee and therefore certain duties. All right? Terminating agency relationship. Hopefully the reason why we terminated the relationship is because we performed. That means we closed. That means money in your pocket, right? The seller's happy, the buyer's happy, and money in your pocket. Okay? Now, involuntary termination means you don't want to, but you're forced to, right? Involuntary. You don't want to, but you're forced to. Now, these are common sense as well. It could terminate. It doesn't, there's no guarantee. It says may terminate. It doesn't have to terminate. But obviously, if one of us dies, right, relationship most likely will terminate, right? Abandonment by the agent, if I walk away. The property was destroyed. Renunciation, so backed out as well. Breach, that means we did not do our part or they did not do their part. Bankruptcy or revocation of your license could result in agency termination. What does that mean? It means our contract to list those homes, it's gone, right? So if you're a special agent, and let's say you are this special agent, and your license expires, what just happened here? Well, you're not entitled to anything anyway, because everything is through your broker, correct? When you get a listing agreement, that means you represent the seller. If you die, does the agency relationship end? Does your agency relationship end? No. If you leave the office, let's say you didn't die, you left the office, you went to another agency, does the agency relationship end? No, because the agreement, even though you're the one that prepared it, the agreement is between the seller and your broker. You just walked away. You guys understand? You got to be very clear about this. Everything is through your... Oh, wait, I did say that before, didn't I? Everything is through your broker. Okay? So you can abandon, but the only way for this to terminate, when we're looking at agent here, it's the broker. If you walk away from the office, you're going to have one very happy broker, because the broker takes over all your listings and doesn't have to pay you. I mean, depending on the agreement you have, right? But most of the times doesn't have to pay you. So when we're talking about here the parties, the agent, whatever, remember who the agent is. Who's the agent? The broker. You are a sub-agent. So if you walk away, it was not yours to begin with. Okay? Any questions on this before I move forward? Questions? I see some confused faces, so come on, drop it. You know, drop it in the chat. No. You're afraid of asking questions? Here's the good news, everyone. You are not in class. So if you were in class, I understand. Like, people are going to look at you weird. You're behind the screen and nobody sees you. All right? Just type your question and take off the camera for a second. Nobody knows who it was. Come on. Bianca's just joined us. Bianca, what's up? All right? No questions? I mean, there's no way for people to know who it was that wrote the question. There's no way. Come on. Don't be afraid. Just put it out there. I'll block it from the screen so nobody sees who it was. All right. So no questions. I'm moving forward. Okay. All right, next thing we have fiduciary duties. What are the duties that I was talking about? Every time you see fiduciary duties, I'm going to write right here, obligations. Okay? Fiduciary duties or obligations. Things you must do for your client. Okay? Or things you must do for your customer, depending. Fiduciary duties or obligations. And here we go. The agency relationship imposes fiduciary duties on the client and agent, but particularly on the agent. An agent must also observe certain standards of conduct in dealing with customers and other outside parties. Agent's duties to the client. This is to the client. What are your duties? Right here. So skill, care, and diligence. Look how I highlighted care. Because if you don't care enough to obtain the skills needed, right? And if you don't care enough to do your due diligence, meaning research, right? Then did you really care? Right? So all these fall under care. In fact, all your duties and responsibilities fall under care. You must care so much that it's your client's interest first. Remember when I asked you guys if you had kids or if you had pets or anything like that, right? Your first duty is to care. Think about your clients as if they were your kids, right? Would you let your kids cross the street, let's say they're 3 years old or 4 years old, cross the street by themselves? No. Would you let your kids 5 years old go to somebody else's house by themselves? No, right? Of course not. So why would you let your client go to open houses by themselves, go to listings appointments by themselves? Why would you let them cross the whole process, right, by themselves? No. Your job is to care so much. You have the right skills and diligence, right, and hold proper accounting of their monies and so many other things. So it's very important to care. So the agent is hired to do a job and is therefore expected to do it with diligence and reasonable competence. Now, competence is generally defined as a level of real estate marketing skills and knowledge comparable to those of other practitioners in the area. So the notion of care extends to observing the limited scope of authority granted to the agent. A conventional listing agreement does not authorize the agent to obligate the client to contract. I just said that, right? I said you cannot sign anything on their behalf or force them or bind them into anything, right? And it does not allow the agent to conceal an offer to buy, sell, or lease coming from a customer or another agent. In fact, most laws, guys, most laws in every state state that any offer that comes through must be presented to the client. Any offer. So you cannot hide, you cannot conceal, as it says here, you cannot conceal offers. Somebody put a $1 offer, that's just ridiculous. I'm not going to show it to you. No, can't do that. It's $1 offer. Hey, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, so we received, I have to present, I'm sorry. We received a $1 offer. Have to still present to your client the offer. You guys understand? Doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. Have to. That's law. Okay? So, further, since the client relies on a broker's representations, a broker must exercise care not to offer advice that outside of his or her field of expertise. Violations of this standard may expose the agent's liability to unlicensed practice of a profession such as law, engineering, or accounting. All right, any CPAs here? Raise your hand if you're a CPA. Okay, Elda's a CPA. Nobody else? Okay, cool. So other than Elda, nobody can say, hey, for tax purposes, this is what you should do. You guys understand? Any attorneys here? No attorneys? Okay. So you cannot say, hey, the law is that you have to do this or you have to do that, right? Oh, but what if we do this? Well, then this is what you do. No. Understand. Let's talk to an attorney. Understand. Let's talk to a CPA. Oh, but mortgages, right? Mr. Realtor, so let's say Amy, I have a conventional offer. Should I take this offer or should I take an FHA offer? Well, what you should do, Amy, is explain to me the difference between these two, right? And if there's any further questions, you should consult with who? With a mortgage professional, the loan officer. Does that make sense, guys? What we're trying to say here is avoid talking about something that's not your expertise. You're not licensed to do so. And even if you are, so let me point something out. Elda, you're a CPA, right? So Elda, should you wear both hats at the same time? Should you be talking to your client about selling his home or buying a home while talking about taxes? Should you? The answer is no, right? Okay, tax season is over. Great, your taxes are done. Hey, you want to buy a house now? Separate. Oh, we just closed. Great. By the way, let's sit down and talk about taxes. After it closes. Can you give advice on it? Sure. Can we act on it? Shouldn't. Okay. Can you hold a mortgage license and be a realtor as well? Yes. Should you do both in the same transaction? Probably not. This is where we get to, guys, where we get to conflict of interest. Are you understanding? Should you have these licenses? Well, yeah, have as many licenses as you can. Have as many as you can. It's lead generation, right? So Elda, I'm sure you have a bunch of clients that are CPA, right? So accounting clients, and you know their financials. So if somebody says, hey, I would like to buy, now that you're going to be a realtor, you can look at it and say, hey, you're in a good position to buy. Let's look further into it. Are you guys understanding this? Give me a thumbs up if you got it. Great. Very, very important. Do not wear both hats at the same time. You can have 1,000 licenses, but one license for this purpose. Once this purpose is fulfilled, let's talk about the other license. Once that one's fulfilled, let's talk about the other license. Okay? Very, very important. And I'm telling you this because this happens a lot, especially with senior citizens, right? Like I do Medicare. So I have the insurance license as well. We do Medicare. And part of our training, which is a yearly training with every single agency that I represent or insurance company I represent, part of the training is simply, hey, your appointment or scope of appointment was to talk about this particular product. So you're talking about United Healthcare, this particular product. Can you talk about anything else? No. Once we're done with that particular conversation, can I talk to the client and say, hey, there's other options out there? If you'd like me to come back for it, I can. Sure. But for that particular moment, your appointment, the scope of appointment or the reason why you had an appointment was for Medicare, that particular product with that particular company. Are you guys understanding what I'm trying to say here? Can I show up later and say, hey, by the way, thank you for getting a Medicare, right? Or allowing me to help you get your Medicare insurance. By the way, do you know anybody that would like to buy or sell a house? It's separate. It was not that same day. Same thing applies to real estate transactions. Conclude that transaction, conclude that deal, and then do everything else. Okay? Do not practice all these at the same time. Very important. All right. Fiduciary duties. Fiduciary duties, we have agent. As an agent, whether you're the broker or the salesperson, this falls under you because it's agent or a sub-agent, doesn't matter. You have to have the right skills, diligence, care, diligence, loyalty, obedience, confidentiality, accounting, and full disclosure. So we're going to go back to when I said caring, okay? Obedience, accounting, loyalty, and disclosure. See, loyalty goes with confidentiality, and diligence and skill goes with care. So for you to remember your specific duties, there's an acronym called COLD. When you represent somebody, you have to have COLD. COLD is care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, disclosure. Okay? So you got to have a COLD. Care enough to have the skills and do due diligence, so don't be negligent in your job, right? You have to obey whatever the client's lawful instructions are. You have to hold proper accounting of their monies. So if it's a buyer and they give you a deposit, right, that deposit must be accounted for. You have to be loyal. That means you'll hold things confidential. You won't tell everybody, oh, they're going through a divorce. You won't be just announcing that, right? And disclosure. You have to disclose anything and everything that could affect the transaction. So this is key. All of these are key. Nina, can you conclude that day and switch you to your other profession, or it has to be on a separate day? If you conclude it, you conclude it. So could it be that day? Oh, by the way, you should think about insurance. If you want to schedule an appointment for another time, we can. Right? Can you address it that day? Yes. If they're willing to sit down with you that day, sure. But you concluded, you closed. So your part as a realtor is done. Okay? If they ask you, can you say, hey, that's a great question. I'm actually licensed. We can talk about that after we close. All right? Try to keep things separate. Unless they're the ones that insist because they know you have that license. Unless they're the ones that insist, always try to let one finish before you start the other one. Okay? And even if they insist, depending on what it is, like let's say you are an attorney, right? Or you're a CPA, or you're an electrician, whatever it is, even if they insist, try to always, I prefer to lose that client for that moment, right? Than to wear both hats at the same time and then lose it all in a lawsuit later on. Oh, because, well, Bruno was the realtor, but he's also the electrician. So he told me that I could do this with the house. He actually walked through the house with me and saw this, saw that, and whatever, and said, this is what you should do. And I did it. And look, the house caught on fire. You see what I'm saying? So try not to do both. I prefer to lose that client for the electrician portion as an example. I'm not an electrician, it's just an example. But I prefer to lose a client for that purpose, right? And still conclude the real estate part to the best of my abilities, right? Skill, diligence, so on, than to try to grab all these things from that one client and then be sued and lose it all. All right, so think about that. Can you use it for leads? So Nina, you said before, for networking, sure, use it. But be honest, right? And be careful when you represent them, okay? Now, agents dealing with a customer, we have to treat them fairly and honestly. Fairly and honestly. We must still disclose certain things. Okay? Must still disclose certain things. All right, guys. So I covered loyalty, obedience, confidentiality, covered all this. Accounting, I talked about it. And here, when we're talking about full disclosure, when we talk about full disclosure, an agent has the duty to inform the client of all material facts, reports, and rumors that might affect the interest in the property transaction. So I want you to write something here. I want you to write anything. Ready? Anything and everything that affects the proposed transaction must be disclosed. So anything, this is under disclosure, anything and everything that affects the proposed transaction must be disclosed. So if it's something that you know, like the seller says, oh, there's mold, but don't tell everyone, don't tell anyone. If there's mold in the house, or if there's a leak in the house, if there's a structural problem that you now know because the seller told you, or you should know because you are the professional, you should ask these questions, right? That you now know, even though the buyer is your customer, meaning you don't represent the buyer, should you disclose? And the answer is yes, because we have to treat the customer fairly and honestly. Don't you think it's fair that the customer, the buyer, knows that the house is falling apart? Or should the buyer buy the house and then it falls apart? You see what I'm saying? So if you know about certain conditions about the house, you must disclose those conditions, even though the buyer is not your client, or vice versa. If you know that the buyer, you represent the buyer, and the buyer lost their job, so they're not able to actually purchased the house. Shouldn't that information be passed along to the seller? Hey, Mr. Seller, the buyer is going through difficulties right now. They might not be able to buy the house. Would you be okay with extending or waiting a little bit longer? You guys understand what I'm saying? So must pass along. I just had this issue, not me directly, but through somebody in my family was selling their house, a condo actually, and the buyer actually lost their job. During this whole pandemic, they lost their job. So can the buyer afford to buy? No. But it wasn't until like 3 days before the closing that was announced. So we have a closing date. They lost their job a month and a half ago, right? It was literally a month and a half before the closing, and nobody disclosed to the client, to the seller, that the buyer had lost their job, that they wouldn't be able to buy. Like, are you kidding me? Would you use that realtor again? Of course not. Of course not. So, and I'm talking about the buyer's realtor. The seller's realtor or listing realtor or agent did not know, supposedly, I don't know, but did not know until we got close to the closing date. But the buyer's agent knew. The buyer's agent knew that the buyer had lost his job. Shouldn't the buyer's agent have notified the other agent? Yes, it is your duty. Anything and everything that affects the proposed transaction must be disclosed. Okay? In recent years, disclosure standard has been raised to require an agent to disclose items that a practicing agent should know, whether the agent actually has knowledge or not, and regardless of whether the disclosure further impedes the progress of the transaction. Should know. Okay? The obvious example of a should have known disclosure is a property defect, such as an inoperative central air conditioner. The agent failed to notice. If the air conditioner becomes a problem, the agent may be held liable for failing to disclose a material fact if a court rules that the typical agent in the area should detect and recognize the faulty air conditioner. There's no obligation to obtain or disclose information related to a customer's race, creed, color, religion, sex, or national origin. We'll talk about that in a different chapter about discrimination. All right? And some states, including, say, where we're at, the state of New Jersey, some states recently enacted laws requiring the seller to provide a written disclosure about property condition to a prospective buyer. So the seller's property condition disclosure statement is very, very important, because it's the seller literally saying, hey, I know about this, I don't know about this, yes, this is true, this is not true, I have no idea, but at least they're putting their face out there by writing it, whatever they know and don't know, and signing. Because now anything in the future, you as an agent, you are protected, because, oh, no, look, right here. Seller said they were unaware, so they disclosed. Who knows the house better than the seller? Me, the agent? No. You guys understand? The home inspector said, here's the report. The city inspector said, here's the report. So you have to pin that liability on the party that's responsible for that particular aspect of the property. Okay? So very, very important that you guys understand that. Duties to a customer, I already told you. You have to be fair and honest to the customer. That's all. Now we're going to fall into intentional misrepresentation, and then we're going to take a quick break. Intentional misrepresentation. Intentional. The moment you said intentional, this is clear fraud. You did it on purpose. Right? You said there's no leaks. Yet you have a private pool in the basement every time it rains. Right? No leaks. Intentional fraud. You knew about it. Okay? Negligence. You didn't care enough. You didn't care enough to do your due diligence. You were not aware, but you should have known of the facts. Okay? Every time you see negligence, you did not do your job. You were careless. You were negligent. Okay? You should have known. Alondra, I'll go to yours in a second, okay? And the last one, misrepresentation of expertise. An agent should not act or speak outside the agent's area of expertise. We just covered this, right? A customer may rely on anything an agent says, and the agent will be held accountable. For example, an agent represents that a property will appreciate. The buyer interprets this as an expert investment advice and buys the property. If the property does not appreciate, then the buyer may hold the agent liable. Okay. All right. To address Alondra's question real quick, can sellers just lie and say they don't know if there's an issue with the property? Wouldn't have to be proved. So buyers and sellers are liars. Okay. Everybody lies. Everybody lies. When they go buy something, you're like, I don't know if you ever did this, but it happens a lot. You apply for a credit card. How much money do you make? I make $1 million a year. Give me the highest credit card possible, right? So those of you laughing, you know what I'm talking about. All right. But when somebody goes and buy the house, yes, I do have the money. I can buy it cash. I can whatever. And then we go check the bank statement. There's $5 there. The seller, there's no issues with this property. This should be $1 million property, actually, in this area. Should be $1 million property. Yet it's falling apart. Do they lie? Yes, because they want to sell. Right? Either they're selling the fact that they can sell the house, or they're selling the fact that they can buy the house. Right? So yes, they lie all the time. But how do we minimize our liability? That's what we're talking about here. How do we minimize our liability? By having the seller's property condition statement. Can they lie on that statement? Now it's up to them, because it's in writing, sworn and subscribed. They're signing that to the best of their knowledge, that's the condition of the property. Home inspector comes along, sees the property. Look, there's stuff that we cannot see. Behind the walls, we cannot see. Right? So, is it possible that the home inspector does not catch something? Sure it is. But that's why we bring the professionals. Because now it's their license on the line. Not just ours, right? Imagine we said, hey, seller, buyer, waive all the inspections. Don't worry about it. This is a perfect house. And then, again, personal pool or private pool in the middle of a rainy day. You are liable now. You guys getting this? All right, Alondra, so yes, will they sell? Sure. Will they lie? I'm sorry, sure. Can it be proven? Not always. But that's why you have that statement made by them that says, to the best of my knowledge and ability, this is the current condition of the property. The roof is 5 years old. Right? It was replaced 100 years ago, but I'm telling you it's 5 years old. Well, if later on there's a problem, right? Later on there's a problem, and the seller wrote the roof is 5 years old, right? Later on there's a problem, they see, no, this roof is at least 100 years old. Now you can sue the seller for misrepresentation. Like, you're not the professional, guys. The agent's not the professional. And our job is not to get on top of that roof and figure out, oh, based on the measurement and based on the way the roof looks, yeah, 5 years old. Not our job. You guys got this? That's up to the home inspectors. That's up to engineers. That's up to everybody else but us. We consult in the real estate transaction. Felix, I'm giving you enough time to finish that question, right? I can always depend on Felix, and Nina's very quiet to get like these book statements, questions. Can your license as an agent be revoked for the mistake of a professional inspector for not finding? Okay, you said already everything you needed to say. Can your agent license be revoked for the mistake a professional inspector? So, are we the professional inspectors? No. Can you lose your license because a professional made a statement? No. Could you Be liable if there's a way that you should have known. That's different. Okay, but you're not going to lose because they made a statement. That's why we want them to make a statement, so we don't lose our license. Okay, that's exactly why. All right, and here comes, I knew it. I don't even know why I started. I knew Nina was coming. There you go. As a, what did I say? Felix and Nina. Everybody else is always afraid of asking questions. Okay, guys, learn from these two. Doesn't matter how the question is, just throw something out there. Nina, as a real estate agent, can you hire home inspectors? No. And rejected. We don't hire anybody. We consult. So, Mr. Seller, you should hire a home inspector. If you don't have one, I can recommend one. Period. Okay? Period. We do not hire anyone. We do not do anything for anyone. We don't. Our job, we are hired to find a buyer for the seller. That we do. We grab the buyer's hand and we walk all the way to the house and say, hey, here's your new house. Put an offer. That we do. We have a buyer and we're looking for a seller. All right. We grab the buyer again and we bring and say, hey, Mr. Seller, you should sell to my buyer. Boom. That we do. From there on, we consult. We advise. You consult with a mortgage professional. You should consult with a home inspector. You should consult with an attorney. You should get the title. You should get this. You should get that. Should. We don't do it for them. If you don't have an attorney, I can recommend one. If you don't have a home inspector, I can recommend one. Like, you can advise. Just be careful, because any of your recommendations will hold you liable if these people are not professional enough. All right, so make sure you represent, who you recommend, is not somebody that's going to feed your pockets, because then there's a beneficial interest there, right? And I know there's some mortgage companies, some inspectors, and some people out there that ask for money or give you kickbacks or whatever. Don't. That's the only thing I can tell you. Make sure they are professional in what they do. Yep. All right, next. Breach of duty. An agent is liable for breach of duty to a client or customer. Since clients and customers rely on the expertise and actions of the agents performing within the scope of their authority, regulatory agencies and courts aggressively enforce agency laws, standards, and regulations. A breach of duty, like you did not do what you're supposed to do, a breach of duty may result in rescission of listing agreement. That means you could lose your commission. It could mean that you gave up or forfeit any compensation you may already have earned. You can have disciplinary action against you, right? Including license suspension and revocation, and even a lawsuit for damages in court. I already covered all this. You could get sued big time. All right? Okay, guys, it's 11:46. Before I get into this, I'll do it after the break. I'm going to show you a quick video. So you guys understand a little bit better what I'm talking about in terms of bring the professionals. If somebody asks you a question that's specific for accounting, specific for taxes, right? Specific for law, specific for mortgages, anything that's specific that's beyond your scope of authority or expertise. Pay attention to this.
I didn't have to search for it. They made it what?
Can you hear it?
Easy. Let me tell you the next big mistake most of us make. Raise your hand, and this is what keeps us from ever getting recharged. Ever. Raise your hand if you have a problem in your life right now. Raise your hand. If you don't raise your hand, you lie about other things also. We all do. I call it our monkey. And that monkey sits on your what? Back. And guess what people try to do with their monkey? They give it to us. And guess what we do? We take their monkey. It's not your monkey. Your job when you leave this class is to start practicing monkey maintenance. That's your job. I am a master at it. Because here's what will happen. People ask you this, so tell me, if I buy this short sale, Do you think that I'll get at least 20 or 30% equity? That's a great question. Let's do this. Let's ask the appraiser that question, and then they can let you know about the equity and how much equity you have in a property. Everybody raise your right hand. Go like this. Turn to the person next to you and say, "It's not my monkey." Let me tell you how serious I am about the monkey. If this is all you get out of this class, it would change your life. Your life. At least 2 or 3 times a day, I'll say to myself, "It's not my monkey. That is not my monkey." I taught a class in Alaska. When I checked into the hotel, they gave me a sheet of paper, and they said, "Mr. Watson, you need to read this." So I started reading it, and you know what it said? It tells you what to do if you're approached by a charging bear. I looked at it, and I said, "Well, why are you giving me this?" They said, "Well, the way our property's set up is you're going to have to go down a trail to get to your cabin. And on that trail, a couple weeks ago, someone was mauled by a bear. And this tells you what to do if you're approached by a bear." And you know what it said to do? It said, if a bear charges you, make yourself look as big, as imposing as possible. To a bear. A bear. And it said, if the bear keeps charging, that doesn't work. Cover up all your vital organs is what you should do. Ball up and play dead. That is the best thing to do. And it said in big letters on the paper, if while playing dead, the bear starts to maul you, do not scream. I said, sir, step into my common sense corner here. I'm being mauled by a bear, and you're telling me to not scream? He said, what happens if you scream, now it becomes territorial, and the bear is probably going to have to finish you off. I looked at him, I said, this is not my monkey. This is not my monkey. This is a security issue. You need to have snipers on the trees with rifles, period. That's what needs to happen. I said, and let me tell you what's going to happen. One of your representatives is going to take me to my room. They are going in first. Once I get the all clear, then I am going in. As far as I'm concerned, this mauling is totally avoidable. Totally avoidable.
All right, so I think you guys get the picture, right? Pretty much, not my monkey means not my problem. I'm gonna pass that monkey to you because you're the professional. You're the home inspector. Okay, that's on you. Mortgage person. Okay, that's you. And that's why you guys need to have a team of professionals, because if somebody asks you a question that you're not the professional at, right? You're not the pro. You don't have the expertise. Say, hey, that's a great question. Let's call this person. Let's ask them the question, right? Do not try to answer things that are not your monkey. Okay. Make sure you start practicing that. Not my monkey. Simple as that. All right, guys. So we're going to go into a quick break. It's now 11:52. So we will be back 12:05. Is that too much? Is good? Okay. So 12:05, we will be back. See you guys in a little bit. For those of you watching on YouTube, I will start a new session on YouTube, a new live. So we'll come back in a second.